Good evening and welcome. We're going to get started. If you could please stand for the pledge. And if you looked at the other flag, it's a beautiful sunset. Well, anyway, want to welcome the Communications Committee. And maybe we have new faces here, or new masks here tonight. If we just go around the table one more time and introduce ourselves. I just want to mention we are being live streamed, so if we could use the mics when possible.
Or just the microphones. Just make sure the green light's on.
Yeah.
Hit the bottom where it says push.
Hello, everyone. Walter Moran, Cornwall Schools, Director of Facilities.
Jean Rose, teacher and parent.
Jim Cragen, I'm on the Board of Education and also a parent.
Richard Schaffner, community member.
Nancy Bryan, Board of Education.
Louis Argenio, Board of Education.
Larry Berger, grandparent and Board of Education.
Terry Dade, Superintendent and parent.
Harvey Sotland, Assistant Superintendent for Business.
Brendan Cardy, Board of Education and parent.
Tom Molfeld, community member, parent.
Dave Conright, community member.
Art Chambers, architect.
Sarah Hamlin, architect.
Lou Rodriguez, Colombo Group, construction manager.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. All right. So this is the first meeting of the joint meeting of the Facilities and Communication Group, and I want to welcome the communication members. Although I think about half of you are on this table also, so that's good. It's a nice. There'll be a lot of good communications back and forth. At this point, I want to turn it over to Terry because he has to leave in a little bit. So, Terry.
All right, good evening. So at the last Facilities Committee meeting, one of the next steps was to begin developing a communications, marketing, and PR strategy and plan for this important endeavor. So I will yield some of my time to Brendan because we had a chance to connect and Communications Committee already met to discuss this topic amongst others. But phase, I'll try to say block 1, block 2, and block 3, just so that we don't confuse it with the phases that may be coming up for the project. So block 1 is really engagement by way of input. So I cautioned our group last time to be disciplined and make sure that we're not rushing to make decisions without us going out to hear from our community, our staff, and other stakeholders. So engagement, block 1 by way of input is absolutely critical. If we rush to make decisions before we do that, we can do all the PR marketing that we want if we're not making the right decisions for what actually gets put up for the vote. So a lot of our efforts are going to be in the next 3 months in that realm, and Brendan will talk about what that can look like. On our end, we will set up a few meetings with our staff to make sure that they have the opportunity to provide input by way of looking over the 5-year facilities plan and the building condition survey to see what are rising to the top by way of priorities. What are the highest priorities as you look at these documents that will help you with regards to teaching and learning and supporting our students in our buildings. I will say it now because I'll say it over and over again with Harvey, that the other really tough part is this is not the time to add 50 things to the list. The list is already quite long, so we might have other things that people might discuss. But I think that we're going to end up in a position where, by way of the building condition survey, there are a lot of things that must be addressed for the health and safety of our students, staff, and families. That doesn't leave a whole lot of room for nice to haves. So that's going to be a little tough. So block 1, engagement input. Block 2, engagement output. How do we really get the information out with regards to what the important details are? We discussed those around this table. What does the funding look like? What is the impact on the taxpayer? What was the decision-making process for developing this list, and really getting that information out? Again, still meeting. Brendan will talk a little bit about what those visuals and things can look like as we discuss kind of that block 2 by way of output. And block 3, and I had the pleasure of opening a new school as a principal, and there's a certain phase in that project that's called the Blitz. So that's what I would see as block 3. Leading up the few weeks before the vote, how do we really have that full court press, that we're dominating the message? We're not sitting back passive, letting others control what the message is out in the community, making sure that we're doing right by our community, and really full court press to get us across the finish line. So those are the 3 blocks that we'll be referencing by way of engagement and strategy. I want Brendan to kind of fill in some of the blanks and then open it up for questions and feedback from the group.
Great, thanks, Terry. Yeah, so the block 1 input is really starting now until the facilities committee and then the larger board has made a decision on what the actual capital project is. So we can figure starting right now to January or so, whenever that meeting is, that we ratify whatever the official term is for the bond that will actually go out to the public. Part of those efforts, we have some action items that we'll be pushing forward in the next few days, really. We're starting work on a public survey that will serve both as an introduction of the bond proposal, just in its highest terms, why we're doing this, what the general outlines are, and then asking for input as to what kinds of projects people prioritize, getting the public to think in terms of choices as opposed to wish lists. And then we will be launching a website that will be dedicated to the capital project. That will then serve as the repository of everything moving forward. So when we have videos, informational videos, presentations, when we live stream our forums, those will all end up on that website, which will be the single link that anybody who wants to know anything about this project can go to and access. We will also be, in the next few weeks, starting to put out media to just raise awareness that this effort is starting. I know that we tend to assume in our bubble that everybody knows about the capital project, but that may not be the case. So we want to publicize our request to take in input so that we really do get a broad section of the community. The plan currently, when we have that questionnaire survey, is to push it out digitally, but also mail it self-addressed stamped envelopes or return postage, whatever they call that, so that we can get a true measurement of community sentiment. And we will also start planning forums for November and December. We would like to make those forums as engaging and interactive as possible, perhaps having an element where we, let's say we have a meeting at Lee Road here. We actually show people in the community what some of those action items would look like, along with some of the successes of the last few years, to say, hey, this is what we've been doing with our own resources, but this is where we need you to fill in the gap. So, and everything that we do, again, will be accessible in person, live streamed, and then memorialized on that website So even if people can't catch it in real time, they'll have everything they need to catch up. As far as what phase 2 would look like, we have outlines, but as I was saying to Terry and Harvey on Friday, if we do phase 1 well, that will greatly impact what phase 2 will look like, because we can't know what messages we will put out until we really know what the public has to say and what their preferences are. So we can get into what that phase 2, or, I'm sorry, Terry, what were we calling it? Block 2. We can get into what block 2 will look like, but I think it's a little premature, because again, if we're doing block 1 well, that will determine what block 2 looks like.
And one last piece that we're looking into is engaging with a PR and marketing partner, just to help by way of getting the message out. So not by way of content. This fine group can handle what the content and information and those kind of things look like. But we all have other jobs, so we need someone to really be on top of this. Something Brendan talked about the website. It's easy to just say, oh, we'll do a website. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes of getting that video edited and everything up and ready to go, nice and shiny and pretty, and reviewed for public consumption. So that's something that we're looking to engage in over the next couple of weeks to kind of see what we get to really have a partner in the PR and marketing arena.
Thank you. It's got a lot of work ahead of us. Okay. I think at this point, Harvey, you could do the introductions for us.
Sure. So I'd like to introduce Luis Rodriguez, recently brought on board as one of our partners here to help with the project, and he will be handling all the construction management. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Lou. I'd like him to, for the benefit of everybody who may not be familiar with what a construction management company does, talk about what they do, what their approach is, and then we'll move into some of the scope of project where both Lou and Barb and Garrett will give their perspective on various aspects of that planning document that I handed out last meeting. One of the things we talked about at that last meeting was that we would come back and have some order of magnitude numbers. That just wasn't possible. By the time Lou got awarded the contract at the board meeting, it only left a week. It just wasn't enough time. We plan on, sitting down immediately after tonight and working on that. But there are components that they can talk about that are more readily known, regardless of whether you're here or another district. So, Lou, I'll turn it over to you, and it's all yours. Push button.
Hey.
Yep.
Oh,
All right.
hey now. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for asking me to be part of your team to really promote this project. First and foremost, what I want to do is just really briefly talk about how a CM, a good construction manager, can really help throughout the process. So let's first start with the pre-referendum campaign, really, getting the voice out to the community. I really like what's being said so far as far as involving the community. It's really important to do that. The one additional thing I would say is get your staff involved as well. So the staff, getting them to really promote your project is huge. And I would say any which way you can involve staff as far as promoting a project is great. The road shows, getting out to the constituents that can't make a board meeting, huge. And we would assist in helping with any communications that you guys have, writing it in a layman's way that so someone's reading it, they really understand, and they can feel comfortable about supporting a project. I've been doing this for 27 years, so you hear it time and time again. I didn't understand what was written, because it may be written in a certain way that just common people just can't really look at it and say, I feel great about that. The website is great. I think having a link that's independent that really talks about a project is huge. Today, take advantage of that. Because now anyone can go there, get the latest and greatest, get the videos and up-to-date information. I think that's great. And we will support Tetra Tech and the district in any which way we have to. If we have to be at the road shows with you, we will do that. A lot of times, even being at a town hall meeting, people want to hear about the project in a lot more detail. We can help you with that. When you look at your overall project, what we want to do is bring insight to your scope and sort of fill in some blanks that may be missing. So you want to make sure that, why didn't we think about that, right? So our job is to, because we work on school projects all the time, is try to, what are we missing here? If we're already going to be in that space, by the way, let's take care of that. And also bring to voice things that are common with other districts, things that other districts are doing. You know, security has always been a big issue. Hey, are your buildings secure? Is that something? So let's get ahead of that so that someone says, well, okay, so-and-so district is dealing with security entrances all over the place. What about our district? Let's talk about that. HVAC, of course, with COVID is at the top of every district's conversation. So that may come up. And it doesn't say that you don't already have a great plan. They're just going to say, do you have a plan that's sort of part of this project to even make things better? And let's have a good answer for that. The BCS, the Building Condition Survey that was talked about, it's a 5-year plan. Some of those things you may have already taken care of. Inherently, you're going to take care of those things as you need to. They're emergencies. So we want to, let's take those off the list. Let's bring new things on the list. We will point those out and really talk about how we can be better prepared in the next 3 years. So when you look at a referendum that passes in 2022, we're going to be building out until 2025 at least, right? So that's just in design the first year, then you're bidding, then you're in construction for at least 2 years. We're projecting out to 2025. So that's what we want to do. We want to bring some of that insight in planning to 2025. And there's going to be questions about costs. People are worried today about their current finances. We want to make them feel comfortable about that. You know, the facilities committee is making a recommendation to the board of a great plan and a plan that makes sense. And I agree. Nothing, no pie in the sky. Let's keep to the basics that are really important. So what we want to do is help the team put together a great plan, great schedule that makes sense and that's achievable. Let's not put together something that we can't achieve, right? Let's put it out there. And if the community on vote day says no, then we got to really also have a plan to, you know, I love exit polls. Let's find out what we could have done better, you know? So let's always plan for that. Let's ask why they said no, and some strategies there. But on the pre-referendum side, that's what we really will do. Upon a successful vote, we take that plan and now put it into real time. So everything we work on during the referendum process really is planning for that vote, that successful vote. So it's all real. Everything I look at is real. We pass. Now let's get to business. Garrett's team has to produce a set of documents that I can bid, a good set of documents, and we will go back and forth. We volley back and forth on, you know, going through the documents, making sure it's a great set of documents. There's always scope creep. We want to keep to your budget. So that's our job, putting together a good set of bid documents, go out to bid, have a successful bid based on our original plan and what we promised the community. Upon a successful bid, we'll make a recommendation to the board, and now we manage construction for those 2 or 3 years that dependent on what was approved, we do that. And we have full-time on-staff personnel managing the project and managing your money as if it were ours. And you know, we're your QA, QC, we're, you know, your eyes and ears on the ground. And, you know, this is all I've ever done. So hopefully you guys will put some trust in me and my team, and we'll give you guys a great service. And I'm positive in May that you guys can probably put out something really special for the district to vote on. So,
Thank you, Lou. That was, anybody have any questions? Well, I guess that was pretty clear. One of the things I just wanted to, and it's been mentioned a couple of times, the role of this committee is to make ultimately to make recommendations to the board. And hopefully if it works the way committees do, the board may have some questions, but they should be able to take our recommendations. I'm saying they, you know, us. It's kind of funny wearing both hats at the same time. But that's the concept of what we're doing here. Is we're going to hopefully come up with a nice, concise scope, and then make that recommendation to the board. And with minimal questions, I would assume there would be some questions, but then the board itself, that's because that they enabled this committee to do that, and that's what we're doing. We also have some funding limits, and Harvey, if you want to just go over that again briefly.
Sure. So, as we talked about in the past, we currently have a fully funded $5 million capital reserve. That's great news, because what that essentially does is that gives the district the ability to pay for the local share of the project. And based on our state aid ratio for building aid, that allows us to do a project approximately $20 to $22 million. And by sticking to that limit, that will result in no additional taxes, no increase, no effect to the taxpayers with respect to this project. It's important to note, and I'm sure everybody will be hearing more about this, this capital reserve, one might easily say in the community that, well, why don't we just not use it for the capital reserve and just give it back to the taxpayers, reduce the levy? It's important to note that this $5 million reserve was voted on for this very purpose. It was not voted on to be just an undesignated fund to do what we needed at that point in time. This is $5 million that has already been approved by the community to be put toward our capital projects. Consequently, that's where we're going to be putting it. Legally, that's where we have to put it. So that's where we stand right now with regards to the funding limit.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. All right. There are some perspectives that, yes, Jim, I'm sorry.
77 is the current percent the state gives?
77% is our current state aid reimbursement rate.
Does that change, how often does that change? Could that change at the first of the year? Is that an annual thing, or is it a school year, calendar year thing, or what's?
It changes every school year.
Every school year?
Right.
So we're locked in?
So every year.
So we're locked in until June 30th at 77%?
Correct.
Great, thank you.
And what I can tell you is that the rate has been just going up slowly, continually. It's a function, it's quite a long, what I like to call an algorithm that they use, but one of the big drivers is the demographics of the community, specifically the wealth ratio associated with Cornwall, both personal and property.
Okay. Yep, I just want to make sure I have the right
Yep.
number. I thought I had it, but
Sure.
wanted to double check. Yeah.
Yes.
Tom?
Harvey, and this may be a communications thing as well, would it be a safe assumption to say that, and this is, I heard you mention we're going to put a bond up for vote. what you've described, although there is a small bond element of it, it's not really a bond. I mean, how do we, there's a marketing thing to the public. People might hear bond and think, you know, debt payments, taxes. I mean, should we refer to it just as a capital project? Should we refer to it as a bond? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, that's a good question. It is a bond. We are borrowing money. The reason we're borrowing money is because if we're doing something for, say, 20 million and we have 5, we have to fund the 15. However, what marketing will take care of is explaining thoroughly that the debt service on that 15 million each year will be offset by the state aid. So that's where we get no tax impact.
The state doesn't give you the 15 up front.
Right.
There you go.
The state pays the money out over time.
I just think it's important that people understand that. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because
Right.
that's going to be
Yeah, that's going to
main
be part
question.
of Brendan's problem.
I mean, just to tie this up, because I think to tie together the last two things that were mentioned, you know, the severity of the needs are such that there is no choice, let's just not do them. You can either pay for them now with 3 to 1 on the dollar, rapidly approaching 4 to
That's right.
1, or you can pay for them when things fail in the middle of the year, which we're getting to the point where they're going to. So we're not at a point where we have the luxury of deciding, will we pay for these things? It's now, how are we going to pay for these things?
Right.
And this is clearly the best vehicle for doing so.
Right. And to your point, remember, as mentioned, the majority of these things are health and safety. We are not, I wouldn't say we're in a critical phase, but certainly something like the bathrooms. You could run into a situation where we have complete failure in the bathrooms. Now we have a bigger problem. Now school's shut down. Now what do we do? Okay, we don't want to get to that phase. We're approaching that, but that's why we're doing this.
I could say more, but I don't want to turn this into a
I
communication
know.
committee meeting, so we'll leave it
Well,
there. But
as
yes.
questions come up, it's a joint meeting, so that's certainly okay to, you know, it'll answer some of our questions as to how you're going to approach this. Yeah,
Just more for people that haven't heard this before, but especially for those folks who might be watching from home. When we talk about potential failure for the bathrooms, it's the stuff behind the walls, which we mentioned at the last meeting. And this is something that's been spoken about for several years. The bathrooms themselves have been kept up, the new fixtures have been put in, they have been very well kept for what we can see. So what we are discussing in that point, what Harvey was mentioning, is the pipes behind the wall, the drains under the floor. It's all that stuff you cannot see. So I don't want anybody to think that we have, you know, kids are walking into the bathrooms and the stuff that they see is in horrible condition, because it's not. They have been well-maintained. We took a tour where there was new fixtures being put in as we were touring a couple of years ago. So that's just the point that everybody needs to remember. It's all we talked about the pipes the last time, you know, it's that stuff we can't see.
Right. And this has nothing to do with neglect, which oftentimes we hear from the community. Walter can tell you, Lou and Barb and Garrett, when these buildings were built, these older buildings, things such as, you know, the piping in the bathrooms, it's galvanized steel. It doesn't last forever. What we're talking about is end of life. It's just plain and simple. A roof goes, pipes go. We have to fix them.
all right. I think right about now, as we take a look at, I believe you guys have seen our sheets. If you could give us your perspectives on what we're looking at.
Not yet.
There we go. Good. Thank you, Larry. So, first of all, I'm Garrett Hamlin from Tetra Tech. I want to just say that I've been doing architecture for 28 years and focused on schools for 20. Done many, many referenda, and everything I'm hearing is the right things. You're saying the things that are going to help make a successful vote. One of the things that I'm very schedule oriented, and I'm thinking about May seems like a long way off, but I believe you've all received a copy of the preliminary pre-referendum timeline.
They've been distributed this evening.
Great. So this is a slide that was actually in our PowerPoint when we presented to the board, and it's critical that we maintain a schedule. And so, Brendan, when I hear about the things that you're talking about, the survey, the website, let's get my glasses on here, the November and December forums, those kinds of things, I think it's going to be really important to get dates for those activities and make sure that they work within the context of the bigger schedule. Because if you look at the bar chart for scope development, we have it ending in, at the end of January, but that's the point where it has to be finalized to a T. Lou's going to have time to work on budgets and refine things. So, so really, ultimately, what we're going to need to do as a committee here is to come to very good conclusions of the scope by the end of this year, because that last month's going to be putting the final sort of polish on everything and getting it ready for the referendum language itself. So. I'm going to encourage us to, let's get some dates for things. Let's start to think about when the forums are. Personally, I think maybe if we're talking about November and December, it needs to, that second one at least needs to be very early in December. And it might be, you know, as we look at it, it might be better to be sort of more October, November timeframe potentially. Just some things to think about, because, you know, if we're going to try and have things wrapped up by the end of the year, we want to make sure that there's ample time for community input and then time to react to that, so that it's not just, you know, thank you, we appreciate your input, but you know, we're out of time kind of thing. The other thing that I'd like to, and I'll answer your question, Larry, about scope in a second, but just as we talk about sort of community engagement, which I have a lot of experience with, and I really like that because it's so important to make sure that the community understands what we're doing here, what we're talking about here. Your question about bond. We're doing a bond. We're borrowing, you know, you're going to borrow a lot of money in order to make this project work, but it's not going to have a tax impact. And getting that, the complexity of that out in simple messaging is really challenging. And it's going to take a number of different ways to say it for everybody to be able to understand it. And believe it too, because, you know, when you say, well, trust me, it's not going to cost anything, do they really believe it? That's really important. So one of the questions that I have, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about it, is the block 2, the engagement output. Well, can you help me understand a little bit more about what you envision for that? Because I get the block 1. That makes perfect sense to me. I'm totally on board with that. And I like the idea of the block 2, but I want to understand sort of the mechanics of what we're thinking about when we're talking about output back afterwards. Because depending on how that we envision that, it will impact the schedule. Because if we're trying to get the scope done and we're serious about getting input and then having an opportunity for output, we're going to have to figure out how the timing for that works. So can you, and I know Terry talked about it a little bit, and Brendan, you did too, but can you just fill me in a little bit more about your ideas about the output part?
Yeah, so I think now we're talking February, April into May, right? February, March, April into May. So that would be, I think that we would have different kinds of media. I would envision videos that would not only explain large concepts like no added cost to the taxpayer, but also specific projects. So I think this could be heavily visual. We could have actual tours of buildings with voiceover narrative of what what this project entails, benefits to the community. Lou spoke of having the staff involved. this could be another, this could be an example of where we get them involved, what this could mean for, you know, their experience in the school, what, you know, all hitting the benefits note over and over again. I think the, you know, obviously we'll do this on multiple fronts. So newsletters, purely informational. I think the videos where, again, talking high level and project specific, we can have a regular cadence once a week, something comes out. If we're talking about 12 weeks, these are, you know, we can cover a lot of the project, if not all of it. Having a mind that we don't want to overwhelm the public and have them roll their eyes, that this is another capital project video. But everything that is posted gets delivered through School Messenger, which is our messaging portal, all of our social media presences, and then ends up landing on the website where it is cataloged under, whether it's, we obviously haven't designed the website completely yet, but frequently asked questions, media content, et cetera. There will also be forums that double now as informational / answering questions. So instead of it just being pure, what are your questions and input and preferences, all that, now we are opening with presentations, 15, 20 minutes, and then answering questions just to clarify what we've presented with the understanding that we're not changing anything as of yet. And so that, yeah, 3 months of basically, you know, explaining education, and then May is push, push, push.
Okay.
And
That-
Garrett, just
Yeah.
one other thing that we have preliminarily discussed is also some of us going to community groups and community organizations and doing presentations when they have their meetings and their membership is together. So we had actually spoken about that a long time ago. It never came to fruition, but for this one, definitely, this is something that we additionally want to do, get out to those groups. We did a little bit the last time, but this would definitely be a bigger push.
Yeah, okay. That actually really helps me out, and it answers the question well. So because what I was becoming a little concerned about was that the output was going to happen after the decisions had been made, and then it's too late for any more sort of changes. So what I'm hearing is that the output is sort of a crescendo, that it's going to have a pace to it. Even starting now, there's going to be some output activities going on, like you said, interpreting the needs out there and the project itself. And so as we're working on scope development, I think that the output grows and grows, and then we hit the third block that you guys referred to as blitz. And where I see again, I'm back to scheduling, where I see the blitz occurring is not just in May, because if you look at the schedule, we've got a board proposition resolution and the seeker resolution at the end of February. That's the point where the district has committed to, we are going out for a vote. There are absolutely no more changes in it. The language is written, you're out, you know, the board has made a resolution and you're out. So what I'm going to encourage is that we think about the blitz starting right at that moment, and that the output block sort of builds to the moment when the board has finally decided, okay, we're going out for a vote, and it's going to be this. It's X number of dollars, 21,300,000 and, you know, whatever the number might be. And here are the scope items, and here's the list. And the list at that point in time won't change because it's already written in the language, and that's what it is. The other thing I want to come back to is the idea of a survey. Are you talking about like a web-based survey, like a SurveyMonkey or something like that? Is that the idea?
Well, it would be in one iteration, yes, but what we always hear when we do a digital survey is that you're only getting parents and people who are involved in the district anyway, which are not typically the voters who would be, you know, predisposed to voting no. So how do you reach those? So we were talking about having actually a hard copy that would be mailed to all voters in the district. It could be like Scantron-like, you know, fill out multiple choice, send back, scan, get the results.
Sure.
It could double as it would be a, you know, short survey. Don't want to give them the entire 5-year building condition survey, but something in the neighborhood of 5 questions just to gauge priorities, and get them, again, thinking in terms of choices with an element of just, this is what's going on, here's where you can go to find more information.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And so sort of like in a postcard format that's got
Right.
pre-posted, they fill out, answer 5 questions, have blanks for add some more information, and then they just need to drop it back in the mail.
Right, and there's also would be a small section for open, I've called it the essay question, not that it would turn into an essay, but just to hear what people's concerns are beyond a multiple choice, because that could very much help us understand what messages, what gaps in knowledge exist, and how we can tailor messages effectively for those months, February, March, April, when we need to, educate voters appropriately, let's say.
Yeah, right. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I like that. We've seen surveys done successfully, and they're very helpful. The questions obviously are important, what you ask, but more in my mind is we need to see that happening right away, because where we want that input is really at the beginning of this. If we saw the survey come back in December after we've done both public forums, then we're going to be kind of out of sync. So
The plan is to do that immediately, have that information in hand before we sit down for the forums in November.
Yeah, that's perfect. That sounds really good. And, I think, I hear again and again, there's a commitment for public input and for transparency. And doing a survey like that is really going to go a long way, especially if it's not just the digital, but you're doing the hard copy reaching out to everyone. It's not just a gesture of transparency. It's really asking people to give you input. How you could get hundreds and hundreds of responses. So how you respond or how you analyze that data is going to also be an important part. We should have some conversation about that, because we'll want a deadline hopefully, and then be able to move forward with that information. Yeah.
Garrett, if I could jump in, so you're the guy in the room with all the experience with these referendums, the timeframes of them. I would suggest, Larry, that Garrett create a milestone schedule for us to, I say, abide by, for the communications committee to use as guidance. Right now, the bar chart is fantastic. Well, the month blocks are quite large and not a lot of detail for dates. Right, so you understand our overarching concept of approach. We're the guys, we're the folks here, all of us, that know kind of the community of it, right? The tones in the field out there, and what has been effective and not ineffective, because it's all effective to one degree or another, but maybe less effective. Maybe you should be driving, where our goal is, the star date here, and what we're kind of, again, that overarching idea of the block plan. Put a milestone schedule. Listen, communications committee, facilities committee, by this date, we have to have the results of this concept. By this date, we have to have this document developed and publicized, pushed out.
I'd be happy to do that. First of all, I'm not the only one with a lot of referendum experience. I'm surrounded by 2 rock stars on either side of me. So, I think that I'm more than happy to help with that. I don't think it's Garrett's developed the schedule and then you guys just accept it. I think this is hey, here's what I was thinking, here's what I've heard tonight, and here's what I think might make some sense, and then there's got to be some give and take on it and some feedback. And there's also got to be some careful, we need to start planning what days those forums actually occur on. What are we, can we do it on a concert
That's kind of where
night
when you started saying forums, and you asked, well, when are they going to be? And, again, your wealth of experience, the front row's wealth of experience, I think needs to half guide us on to say, hey, guys, if you're thinking December 15th is your forum date, and then it's like the schedule. You build the schedule. You start at May, you build it backwards, and you hit your milestones, and you know your dates. If we're thinking December 15th is a great date for this XYZ, and for car crash reasons why it's not, well,
we should decide that.
Please guide us accordingly. You know what I mean? For whatever reasons it is, no, December 3rd has to be this date because it allows this much time for post-processing, this much time for future development, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think I'm totally on board with that, and I'm game for that. But one of the things, I think, Brendan, you probably already have this in your head. You've got some ideas of where you want to go. It might be just as productive for you to rough out what you've been envisioning for your schedule, and then, you know, we feed back on it and we work together on it, because you clearly have a plan, you've clearly thought about this, and so I see it as a collaboration, I guess is
Without
really.
question.
Yeah,
Without question.
yeah, definitely.
So perhaps if you could, however you do it, whether, you know, collaboratively,
I'll rough
the three
something
of
out,
you.
or,
Yeah.
you know, we can.
And Brendan, and if you guys could email each other
Uh-huh.
so that we have something for our next meeting, that we actually have something in writing, not wait for the next meeting
Yeah.
to have the discussion, but have the stuff ready to hand us and say, okay, this is what we're gonna
An
do.
action item.
Yeah.
A true action item.
Yeah,
And I'll also say, we always need the administration involved in that. So there will not be a time when I'm talking to a one-on-one board member without having Harvey involved in that, or Terry, or
Absolutely.
both, because
Absolutely.
that's just a,
No,
that's a
ab-
recipe
abso-
for disaster,
absolutely.
folks.
yes.
Yeah.
That is,
Yeah, good. But and
We
I know
don't
we all
wanna
know that, but I
upset
just want to say
Harvey.
it. Yeah, exactly.
well, Terry's not here. Okay.
Do you have, Barb, you have a?
Hi, everyone. So again, Barb Chambers from Tetra Tech. So I just wanted to mention, I think the first time we met, Harvey, you mentioned wanting to work on a long-range plan. And maybe part of the framework for this in dealing with the public is the whole idea, you know, taxes are here, and when debt service falls off, we add something. We're trying to keep it even. And we know there's this moment in time, and there are these critical things we need for the health and safety, and we want to make these buildings watertight. But we know we are now creating this long-range plan. So if someone makes suggestions and they see it doesn't fit into the parameter of this referendum, they clearly understand that you are also planning a future thing, because there's such a difference between no and next time. So I hadn't heard that really mentioned here, and I just wanted to throw that out for what it's worth. And then your question in terms of reactions to some of what was on the list, did want to just clarify that some of the things currently on the list are not inherently aidable, which does not mean you can't do it. It just means it's that much more that comes out of the local share, which means the overall project would be a little bit smaller. And so I just wanted to go over some of those things so you have it in the back of your head for planning purposes. So some of the things I saw were paving. SCD is all about we pay you to replace things and rebuild things. We don't pay you to repair things. So when you're doing paving, you've got to take it down to subbase. You've got to take all the top off and rebuild it. So there's no just seal coating or just putting another layer on the top. You got to remove a bunch of stuff to put it back in order for SCD to pay for it. Press boxes are not aidable unless it is in conjunction with a new building. So any press box work would not be aidable here. Administration buildings inherently not aidable. Because there's no student occupancy of concession stands or the outdoor bathroom storage / team lockers, those would not generate any aid. Something we have sometimes done is maybe part of the site work just happens to include a brand new concrete pad just about perfectly the size of one of those things, and maybe there are some sleeves and maybe some utilities run out to that concrete pad. And then maybe that's something that happens later with booster clubs. But I just wanted to highlight those types of buildings are not aidable. Bleachers are aidable as part of a site work. So I just wanted everyone to have a clear understanding of that moving forward. Again, doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that much work comes out of the local share.
So I'll add a little bit to that. Site work is aidable, so fields are aidable, but they have limits on how much SED will contribute towards those things. And those limits relate to the educational capacity of the building itself. So it's not a blank check that you can just do as much site work as you want. There's some limits on that. And we'll face that if we're talking about a field upgrade project. That will be a critical component of the conversation. The other thing that I will add is that there is a caveat for paving aidability with SED. So as Barb said, they're not going to pay for repairs. They're not going to pay to just replace carpet. That's a maintenance issue. Paving, they're not going to pay for seal coating. They expect you to do full depth replacement, which is what Barb described. There are some instances where we've had success with, and this, I'm going to get technical for a second, but just hold on, because I want to say it in public, but I also want Walt to hear this, because we've talked about it before. There are some ways that you can get paving aided if you do enough testing to show SED that the subbase is acceptable. You do some borings, and you convince them that it's a waste of money to rip out 12 inches of gravel, perfectly good gravel, and put in 12 inches of replacement gravel, because you know they're as conscious about money as anybody, frankly. And so this is the, and I wanted to say this as an example of, this is the level of technical expertise that this team is going to bring to the table, because these are very sort of complex and subtle innuendos and those kinds of things, but we will help you navigate that. And we are experts at SED work. We're third-party reviewers, so we know how to review other people's drawings, and we'll help get you through all that stuff. Reclamation is an aidable piece as long as it, like you're talking about mill and replace. Yeah, we can do that, and it's aidable, but it's going to fall back to this category of what's the sub-base under it, and does SED need either more convincing that the sub-base is acceptable, or are they going to demand that the sub-base be replaced in addition to the reclamation? Yeah, Lou, do you want to talk about reclamation in terms of when you've used it and value to projects? Because I think there's some paving that we're going to be doing here.
Yeah, I think these are great questions. We've done projects where we've, like Garrett has said, we've been able to prove that the base is in very good condition. And you can see if you've been running in your parking or your circulation, and you got some movement, but it's been there for 15, 20 years. You know that base is pretty hard. We look at a mill and fill. We look at how much, if we have to even touch that base. Right now, the normal spec on a heavy-duty asphalt is 12 inches of subbase. Across a significant amount of site work, that really adds up, because you are, in theory, you have to get rid of that 12 inches plus your binder plus your top. You're getting rid of it. I like the idea of reclamation. I like the idea of reusing. If you have good material, let's use it. You know, we can have it tested. We can have proctors come out, and we can do that. So I think it's a great. Especially if you're doing a significant amount of site work, it's great to look at. Also, in your field work, it's great to look at as well. What are we building on? You know, on the field work that you have, there's a significant amount of stormwater associated with synthetic fields. So we want to make sure that whatever we're looking at makes sense, what we're building and how we're dealing with the stormwater situation on that. And your existing stormwater also in your parking and circulation. Let's make sure that all works, and we're budgeting appropriately for that. So, and like Garrett said, we've been able to really push for aid in those situations. Even with reclamation, we've been able to push for aid on reclamation, and even bid it that way too. Bid it, give me a full import of subbase, and give me a number for reclaiming a certain portion of that. We bid it that way to bring value to the district during bid time. So I think that's important. And just backing up real quick, I love the discussion about getting to a referendum. What's really important during this process is making sure that we don't confuse your budget vote and the project. Let's make sure there's nothing in the budget vote that really people are like feeling negative about, and then on the same day they bring that negativity towards the project. So that's going to be really important for us to understand as part of this communication process. How is the community feeling about your budget? And if all of a sudden, if you said, hey, we're laying off so many teachers, that's going to bring a negative component to that budget vote, which inherently could translate to a negative proposition vote. So those are important things for us to know, because you got to sort of do that. You're doing the dance and goes to the schedule. When you're doing the campaign and that road show, how does that run in parallel with the budget vote?
So Larry, I want to answer a question about scope. We talked a lot about everything else. And our feeling at this point is the list makes a lot of sense, and really the next big step is to have the Palumbo group start to put pricing to things so that we can start to understand where we're at against capital project size of 20 to 22 million, because that's critical. You know, the budgets that you have at this point have been, you know, sort of loose estimates at best, you know, best description. And Lou's going to have to get down to brass tacks to start to say, okay, here's what these things are going to cost, so that then we as a group, you as a committee, can say, well, we got to get this done, but this can wait. And Barb, is there anything that stands out that you're like, they're, you know, must-dos at this point?
I think a lot of it has to do with keeping the rain out, just the perimeter of your buildings, the building shells themselves, because, you know, you can replace the casework, but if the roof is leaking on it, that's, you know, so I think that is, and that's all on there, but I think that's mission critical.
Thoughts, questions?
Well, we all had a chance for the last 2 weeks to look at the list. And when I took a look at it, my first thought was also, it was the building envelope and the bathrooms. That was my first, whatever they cost, those have to be done. And then we can begin to look at our other things. All in, and as far as I could tell, you know, if we were to take a look at grading them from 1 to 5, when I went through it, I only came across maybe a couple of 3s, but for the most part, they're all 1s and 2s, you know, for various reasons. You know, when we talk about not just the building envelope, but also the usability of our facilities. You know, field, for instance, it's not just planting grass. If we could turn that field into a 3 or 4 sport field, it then becomes much more usable. It frees up other fields for other purposes. You know, other teams could come in. We would also give the fields a chance to rest so that they could grow a little. I think the only good thing that ever came of COVID was that our fields had a chance to rest. But, you know, those are the kinds of, you know, any input on that? That was what I thought. Tom?
We talked last time about, and I don't know if anyone had a chance to think about it, but based on your historical experience, one proposition versus 2 propositions. We debated last time and said we were going to think about it. One being improvements to all of our buildings, which obviously need to be done. The second proposition would be athletic fields. Is that a path that you would recommend, or would you recommend doing it all in one proposition based on your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And it depends on the community. So we've seen it both ways. I've done large capital project votes, over $50 million, and they were adamant that the fields needed to be in the project because they had such a strong athletic community, and they had a confidence that the athletic community was going to come out and carry the vote, and it did, actually. And I was a little worried about it, but in the end, it carried the vote. More often, though, those tend to be, especially turf fields, if there's a question of controversy over them, splitting those out as a separate vote sometimes makes pretty good sense. Because then you're letting the community decide. That's the rationale for that. So I think in this community, it's going to deserve some conversation and some input because, we know we're outsiders. Look, we're school experts, so I don't have any worry about that. But you know your community far better than I do. And so we're going to have to rely on your and the board's gut sense for how it's going to make the most sense.
Well, that may be where Brendan's surveys come in, and some of the feedback we get from that before that decision actually gets recommended, one way or the other.
Yeah.
So, Larry, amongst these selections here, there was some talk of them about drainage and earth fields, rehabilitating earth fields, and then one or two spots it was turf fields. Can Lou, maybe yourself, or Garrett, or not to impugn anybody, can you guys talk about, maybe I'm ahead of my head a little bit, but
No, go.
help me understand timeframes related to this, so we as the group understand them. And what I mean by that is, there's a growing season, a turf growing season. It's, you want to do a bathroom, you can do a bathroom over after hours. You have to close the bathroom down over the course of 1 month. Miraculously, the bathroom's brand new. It was all second shift work or third shift work and sparkling clean. For earthen fields, there's got to be a time when, we're experiencing it with the golf course here. They're doing work and they have to go grass. It's a full growing season, presumably before this begins. Can you compare timelines? I guess, again, overarching.
Lou, welcome to the team.
So, again, great questions. So if you're looking at a natural turf field approach, at a minimum, you're looking at 2 growing seasons. That's what you'd like to see. And if that's the discussion moving forward, what you want to make sure is that you have that timeline in there, like you said. What you don't want to do, what we have done in the past, if you sod the field, make sure there's irrigation associated with it to really make sure you have a great product. If it's just going to be a natural turf, again, you're going to need plenty of irrigation, but the pro to a sod is you might be able to play on it a little sooner. If you're playing soccer on the sod, soccer is a tough sport on sod. So again, when you look at the discussion on natural turf, what are you going to be playing on that field? And if it's soccer and football, the soccer duration is going to be really important to understand. And you're going to want to make sure you get the 2 growing seasons in to establish a great turf to support that,
For clarity, the growing seasons, a spring growing season and a fall growing season.
That's correct.
So if
or a fall and a spring. It could be.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So
I do.
It really depends. It could be either or, but it could be, natural turf on a baseball field, we try to make sure we're planning ahead. If it's a natural turf on a football, soccer field,
I got you.
let's plan, let's make sure that we're looking to have the fall, spring, so that you're ready for the fall football, right? Now
but you're losing a fall. In scenario A, it's a year block of spring fall.
Yep,
You lose spring ball, you lose fall ball.
that's right.
In the other scenario, it's fall first, then spring, so you're losing fall, but just which order?
It's which order you
pill can
go.
you swallow easier?
It's which one you, yeah, exactly. And I guess that's why a lot of districts have looked at synthetic as an option. You put the carpet down, tomorrow you're on it, once you're ready to go.
Okay.
So there is a difference of opinion on that as well, but,
I
you
think
know,
that's where my mind was looking for clarity, that overarching, you're looking at losing 2 seasons
Yes.
of any, pick the sport, irrelevant,
that's right.
spring and fall, versus a few months or probably 1 season, I guess if it's turf, right? You do it if you started in the summertime, you'd lose probably the fall season, or?
That's
I
right.
guess it depends
So-
on how exotic your development is.
So it really depends on your facility, but normally we can, within 6 to 8 months, we can have a full facility completed synthetic. With the turf option, what we want to make sure is the spec really talks about maintenance. When do you guys really take over? You don't want to take over until, that second growing season. So they're cutting, they're taking care of it, they're watering it, they're doing all the right things.
The contractor.
The contractor is,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, he's taking care of it for those 2 growing seasons. So we know we want better than 80% growth on that field all day, right? We don't want any patches, and that's what we try to look for in the natural turf. We don't want any patches in there. We don't want them coming in with, some poor soil.
Sure.
We want to establish a great turf. And the crown of that field is going to be really important too. That's something we really want to talk about, make sure it's right and on the money.
All right.
Yep.
I think that clears it for me, thank you.
Yep.
And I think part of that discussion becomes dollars and cents, long-term dollars and cents. Numbers of sports that can play on it, the longevity of either field, and those kinds of things. One must be replaced, what's the maintenance on one, what's the maintenance on the other. So those are the kinds of things we would look to you for clarity on.
Yep, and we've done that analysis, actually. We can share that with you. It depends on what sports and those kinds of things. But in the end, the turf fields are more expensive. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You offset them by some benefits that you have less mowing involved in them.
Did you say turf? Natural turf or synthetic turf?
Thank you. Artificial turf are more expensive. Yeah, they're certainly more upfront costs, and they're offset by the other costs. But at best it's break even, and that really has to be in a unique situation. What often drives artificial turf decisions is how much play time do you need? And that's a big thing, because on a natural turf field, it has to rest. And if you don't let it rest, it will convert back to what it is right now. That's critical. The other thing too is, sort of what athletes are playing on and what their comfort level is as they go to other venues. That's a real factor in our world today, because we're seeing more and more turf fields out there. So, that is a reality of part of the conversation we'll have to have. The one other thing I want to do is I want to come back to your question about breaking a separate bond vote off, doing 2 bond votes at once for capital work. That's fine, but you can't give the community all kinds of options and say, well, we'll just let them decide. The board has to make some decisions as to, are we taking a natural turf project out as a separate referendum, or are we taking an artificial turf project? It's not like, let's do 3 referendums, one's for the base project, one's for artificial turf, and one's for natural turf, and we'll let the community decide what they want. The board has to actually make the decision of what it's taking out to the voters. And that's a hard decision, and I've done it I've worked on projects with boards dozens of times, and I don't envy those decisions that will need to be made, and I know they're going to need to be made here. We'll help you, and we'll support you in all that, but ultimately the board has to decide, are we taking this kind of project out, or are we taking this project out? That's what.
And what I'm hoping is that by the time we have come to that recommendation, that we will have worked out
Yep.
whatever, and then we will bring our recommendation to the board.
Yeah, exactly.
One or the other.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, Jim?
Yeah. Just a couple of quick comments. Yeah, hopefully the 1 versus 2 vote is kind of settled based upon, really the next step we need to take is get some hard costs with this needs list, and hopefully that decision kind of falls out of that, and that becomes clear. But I just had a question for the three of you, for Barb and Garrett and Lou. We talked a lot about the timeline, communication. Is there anything today that we are behind on? Anything that you guys are looking at saying, we got a problem? Obviously, we're talking about in the future, we want to have communications meetings, we want to get community input, we've talked about all of that. Is there anything that we need to get up to speed on, and need to get up to speed on now?
No, you're right on track. You're doing fine. But we need to be vigilant. And so your answer of the surveys coming out like nearly immediately, that's really, really important. And then the question of when are the forums going to be? Those are the other two things in my head that we have to settle on where they're going to be, because they're going to define lots of other things. Those are kind of the big milestones in my head. But to answer your question, we're in great shape. We just got to keep pushing forward.
Any other questions? At this point, I guess I would like to know the feeling of the committee as to whether we should have a discussion on those preliminary sheets that were given out, conceptually, not necessarily each line item. I don't want to get ahead of what Brendan will be getting from the public. I don't want to get ahead of that and have them feel that, oh, we've already made the decision. What difference does it make?
I don't think it won't be to that level of detail. So, I mean, there's an understanding that we as a committee need to start moving forward on that work certainly before the data is going to come in, certainly before the forums happen. So I think it's fine to move forward with that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Larry, can I offer a
Yes.
suggestion? I think it's fine to have that conversation. I agree with that. But what would be most helpful to us as your team is to know, like you said, what is the committee's feeling about what are the most important things? When you look at that list, what jumps out as, and you answered it, you said bathrooms, right off the bat, and building envelope. Those two things. Are there other things? Those are the kinds of things that will help us, because then Lou can spend more time on the things that we know are like clearly your priorities at this point. So,
All right, at this point, I'll open that conversation up to the committee, and having looked at the sheets, I mean, that was my reaction. And, I guess some of the question is what entails the building envelope and what doesn't, and what is critical and what isn't critical, those types of things.
I'll
Jim?
just real quickly say, obviously that's, that has to jump out to you, roofs, walls, you have to get all that. But there's, quite a few of these, there's a lot of mechanicals, HVACs, boilers, and I'd love to just, as Lou gets into it, to decide, is all of that, I'm sure some of that needs to be done today, but maybe some of that is something that can wait 5 years. Because some of this was based off of a 5-year plan. So I'd love to get, the opinion of, as you get into it, as you look at it, maybe some of that can wait. I'm sure some of it cannot, but that would be great to get that as you get acclimated to your role and check everything out.
I can jump in as well. I went through 1 through 5, 5 being what I thought was critical path items. I had a couple of 5+ that I really wanted to make sure I got focused on. But I think I have the same sentiment, is the health and safety items, I think, are critical path. The bathroom situation, again, not the commodes, not the hand dryers, but truly the substructure they're in. So we can get into there and we can repair them with, contemporary means and methods, and really take that to the next couple decades, and, kind of check that box and not look back. Some of the facade items, I wanted to know if they were aesthetic, if they were cosmetic, or if they were structural. And if, just a little clarity there on, as, like you said, Jim, about some items that, maybe Luke can drill down on, or Walt, or somebody can drill down on. Just, so if it was a more aesthetic item, I kind of backburnered that just a bit, because, I know what happened in our past here with our previous, bond approaches. And I have to be honest, I have the fields as, that whole area of development at the middle school as a very high priority. I have it as a high priority. I think we're asking for a safety issue with the people hanging on the fence. I think we're asking for safety issues with guests on the other side, with the bleachers and the condition that they're in. I think we're asking for health issues with not having lavatories there of a permanent nature or semi-permanent nature, 3-season nature anyway. I think we're asking for heartache by that area not being further developed. The community had the outcry years ago about, bring it back, bring the games. We built the field out in, 94. We'll bring that back to our area, the town. Well, let's bring it back. Great. Let's make sure we can fit everybody appropriately and safely. So I think that kind of, on my mind, had some high ends. And two items that resonated with me were upgrades to the high school, the locker area, a locker room at the high school versus locker rooms at the middle school. The middle school locker rooms are deplorable and need immediate attention. So, that was my overarching sentiments.
Anyone else? Anything? Dave, is your mic on?
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, yes.
Okay. Just a couple, I've been taking some notes here. I was glad that Louis brought up, we shouldn't be discussing any kind of grass fields without bringing in the irrigation piece, because it's going to be a mandatory thing. If you're going to put money into a field, you're going to have to irrigate it. Irrigation is very expensive in this town. Water's expensive, and it's not going to go down. So that's one piece, and I'm not trying to play one off against the other. It doesn't make any difference to me. Just going through some of the line items too. The bus loop is a priority, is on here. I think the bathrooms and things like that are more important. The bus loop can have some work done to it at the middle school, but I don't think that the full-blown plan that we saw in the previous two bonds is a feasible thing at this time. That's something that can be pushed down. I'm not sure about, Walter could probably answer better than anybody, how the HVAC, the BCAC to be done as a separate project. I don't know what that note really means.
Harvey, could you explain that one?
Mechanical, note, BC wing AC to be done as a separate project.
Dave, I can explain that. So, a couple board meetings ago, we talked about how we're going to be implementing the federal funds that the district received. And one of the things we talked about was to, rather than use that federal funding for a capital project, because you're not going to get any aid on it, we talked about supplanting something in the current year's budget, which we can do, meaning we're going to take that federal funds and we're going to use it for something that's already budgeted for in the budget. What does that do? That creates a surplus, a dollar for dollar surplus. So if we were to supplant $1 million, okay, that means now we have $1 million of surplus that we could put into a project. And that $1 million is really our local share. So we're really maximizing it. If our rate is 77, I always use 75 because it's easy to do the math. We can get 4 times that in terms of a project. So the point being is that that is where that is going to be done. It's going to be done as a separate, what we call a transfer to capital project as a result of that surplus generated from the federal funds.
Do you have a time frame for that?
Well, it's going to be, it would be in the 22-23 budget,
Okay.
okay?
So that would be next summer work?
I don't know about that, but, you know, the budget has to pass, and then you gotta go out to bid and all that other good stuff.
Okay.
You know, the best we can hope
But I
for.
mean, it's a high priority item, right?
It is a high priority, but the best we can hope for is that perhaps we can do it based on, without getting in technical, how we're gonna, you know, the mechanics of this, it might be able to be done somewhat on a second shift. So,
So that, but that rate, that ranks high, because that ranks high on BCS survey also, right? I mean, these are health and safety things that rank pretty high. So, Walter, all the mechanicals, on mechanical for the middle school, all the air handling units and locker room, gym, all those are, would you say those are high priority?
I would say so.
Okay. What other questions do I have? What do we expect a full building roof scan to show?
Right now, I do have some proposals from Tremco to do a infrared scan on our roofs, and as the team coming on board, they're in agreement that's really the best way to determine the functionality of our roofs, where are the leaks, where are the spots that we need to replace. There's some roofs that we know right away, like the 72 roof of Willow Avenue, we need to replace that almost immediately. But, you know, some areas are at the high school that were in question by the analysis we had done back at that time, the D wing over at the middle school, and, you know, a few other areas. The infrared scan is going to tell us where we need to put our money and where we need to replace. So that's what that line item means.
Okay, so that's an important thing to do.
That's a baseline.
Yeah.
I just want to mention with SED aidability again, and I can't tell from the breakdown of the building condition survey, but just so we're clear, SED wants you to replace a whole area of, like, if this was a roof and the stage was a roof, we couldn't just do that section of roof without doing this whole plane of roof, but we could not do that plane of roof. It's a whole roof section, not a little piece at a time, if I'm explaining that clearly. So, again, but we can sometimes get creative and add an expansion joint, and now we've created a section of roof. But again, it's one of those, SED wants you to do the whole thing versus a little piece. So we just need to make sure that we're in sync with what the building condition survey calls for in terms of any sections versus entire areas and what will be aided by SED.
What if astronomy club met up there? Would it be a classroom? Educational space?
There you go.
Sorry.
That's okay.
That question has not been answered.
That's okay.
I thought that was a pretty good question.
Just the same that health club will meet outside in the locker rooms that we need.
So may I, Dave?
Yeah.
So I do agree, I am in agreement that we look 10 years, 12 years out, because it's apparent that we do have a lot of needs in the buildings, and it's apparent that we haven't been able to address those needs in at least the 20 years that I've been here. So I think it's important for us together as professionals to identify everything. And here's the 20 million plus or minus that we're able to do now, but we're not going to forget about the other items. And there is a plan moving forward, if it's in year 6 to year 10, and what does that look like with high school debt falling off and what we'll be doing the next time. I think that's important because we're showing the community that we're responsible and we're seeing the whole picture. And we're putting a plan together, not so close to our face, but the long range, that strategic planning for our buildings. I think that's critical that we do that. This way, when the information goes out to our community, because they'll see that we're removing things that are very important. Boilers at the high school, 20-year life, well, McLean, we're at 20 years. We're probably going to end up removing them because somebody's going to say, hey, you know what, you could get a couple of more years. But we can't remove them and they fall off the list. They have to go on to another list, all right? Because it's important that we go through that cycle, and as a district, we begin that cycle of replacing those items and getting back to taking care of our facilities the way that we need to. So I think that 10-year, 12-year, even a 15-year plan, if you were to take a look at what a university does on a master plan, I think that's critical. We won't be able to do everything, but I think the most important things are the building envelope, the roofing, absolutely the fields, okay, whatever that looks like. I know this community, I know the facility use, I know the opportunity cost. There's a number to that. I'm on these fields all the time. Dave Carnwright is absolutely correct. If we were to have a natural turf field, the cost of that irrigation. In addition to that, we are not allowed to use any pesticides or herbicides on any of our organics. And anybody knowing how they maintain their own lawn this summer, it was almost impossible to keep those weeds away. And you know, those issues happen to us here. So I think the fields are number one. It's really if you look at the middle school, it's a snapshot of 1950. And nothing's really changed from that time. Yeah. And boy, we've shined it up. And if someone from 1950 were to portal to today, they go, wow, it looks like, you know, very similar. But I think our programs have changed, the needs have changed. The drainage at that field is extremely challenging. I'll leave it at that. So that needs to be taken care of. And at the high school, the drainage at those fields are extremely challenging. And if we're going to, you know, be going underneath the ground, what are we going to put on the top? So I think that's why there's those two sections of athletic turf. And then we go back to the competition. If our athletes are going to compete on a certain surface, I think it would be a best practice that they practice on that similar turf. But I would let our athletic director speak to that in that program. But I think the lavatories, building envelope, the fields, those are high priorities. And there's an opportunity cost to all of that. There's a sanitary cost to our lavatories. I've taken pipes out of these buildings that are corroded unbelievable. You know, we're maintaining. We are doing our operational and our maintenance work here without a doubt. We are working our tails off to keep these buildings together. But it's time now. And I think the committee is on the right track on choosing the highest priority. So, you know, I thank everybody.
In going through the list, there were a couple of lighting issues. This room, for instance. Could that be put into an energy project?
Lighting's a good candidate for energy projects, absolutely, yeah.
Just wonder if that would be another way to free up some money in one spot, similar to the way we took all our exterior lighting and LED'd them and so on. I'm just wondering if there's something we can do with the lighting that needs to be replaced around the district to, now, you had looked at that in the past?
Walter and I have looked at various programs put out by the local utility companies. They come and go. You got to catch them at the right time. Some of them are worth doing. Some of them aren't. We have utilized some of them in the past. When you say an energy project, I'm not sure if you're talking about an energy performance contract.
Right. Yes, an energy performance contract.
Okay. So an energy performance contract is something we certainly can do. I know you guys can talk about it at length, but what I'll mention is an energy performance contract is a project that the state SED allows you to do without voter approval, as long as the payback is, I believe it's 18 years?
18.
Still 18 years. So if they crunch the numbers, these guys have to do the numbers, and it gets scrubbed up at SED. If that's the case, we can actually do a project without having to go out to the taxpayers. The one thing to keep in mind is that the aid ratio that I mentioned, 77%, actually drops by 10%, because there's a 10% incentive in there that if you don't go out to the taxpayers, so we'll be looking at 67%. Still a good percentage, don't get me wrong. If you go out to the taxpayers, then you can get the full 77%. But it's certainly something that can be done. I know that you guys, work with these a lot.
Yeah, we've done a lot of energy performance contracts per se, and energy projects also. So we can certainly discuss that. There's
Right.
pluses and minuses.
I'm just trying to think if there's things that can come off of this sheet, that can come out of the 20 million, that we can do another way, that might be beneficial.
Yep, that's a good strategy to consider, absolutely.
Lou?
I mean, I have to say, I would say, first and foremost, give the community the opportunity to vote on that. You take the savings on it as opposed to the EPC taking the savings. So they're making money on the fact that you're saving money on replacing that fixture. So I would say that my personal thought is the EPC should be a second approach, unless you really feel the voters wouldn't back the project. But I like the idea of including the lights, including all the energy efficiency items in the bond, and now you get the full value of it, as opposed to with the EPC, the savings on that energy is paying for that note, right? It's not going in your pocket, it's going to the EPC. So it's just a different way of looking at it. I've done, as Garrett said, I've done a lot of projects with EPCs, and I always like to think of it as a second approach. But first and foremost, let the community say that they don't want to change the lights in the rooms associated with ceiling replacements and things like that. That's why I'm here. I'm giving you my gut on how I look at it.
That's why I brought it up with you guys sitting in the room.
Just as a follow-up on that, I agree with everything you're saying. I think one thing that we should always keep in mind, which is a theme that has been brought up several times tonight, for the things that don't make the cut, we have to have a plausible argument for how we're taking care of those next, which is why I would say Larry's approach was initially perked my ears up, because we can say, not only are we doing that, we have a way to do it in a cost-effective way.
Right.
If it's in the bond, and whatever it takes the place of, if we don't have as compelling an argument for that, that could be something to consider.
Right. Oh, and just one other thing I have to say about your list. Overall perspective, what I do like is that it seems like there's some equity here. You're doing work across all the schools, I think, which is really important. And there's some commonality there. Roofs, bathrooms, exterior envelope items. There's things that when you're looking at a buy, and that's how I look at it, I'm looking at, when you're planning something in the future, if you're doing multiple bathrooms, you're going to get a better buy from the contractors because you're doing work across multiple schools. You're going to get a better buy on the roofing if you're doing it across multiple schools. You're going to get a better buy on site work if you're doing, if a guy's coming in, the mobilization for a contractor just to come in for a small scope of work, why do that? Make sure you're doing something significant so that you're getting some real value across the board. And so that's what makes sense about this list. There's a lot of commonality there across the schools. So I think it's a good start, and it's a good, smart approach.
I think that's probably why it's critical to have prices and a path forward to even know if we're in the ballpark here. Like Jim said, I mean, if we're close with equity, that's a great thing, I think, and we're moving in the right direction. I had a question about, Walter, I can appreciate everything you said in terms of a strategic long-term plan. How does it work from a capital reserve funding perspective? Meaning, will we be replenishing that as the years go on? And is that something like, okay, we move these things 6 to 10 years out, but we're also putting money aside for 6 to 10 years out? And, just kind of thinking along those lines?
So the way that a capital reserve works is that you're not allowed to replenish it. So you set a $5 million, we had a $5 million limit. It could have any limit you want initially. Once you reach that, that's done. To do and to put more money aside, we would have to go back out to the taxpayers, get their permission to set up a capital reserve again at whatever dollar amount we want to pick. So that's how it works.
And how long did it take to make that reserve, Howard? About 5 years?
Yeah, about 4 or 5 years.
It ain't bad.
Yeah.
I think it's a great question, Tom, because I asked Harvey and Terry the same question a couple weeks ago.
Should go on the bond, should go on the vote.
Said, can we just replenish it? But I think, Walter, I really appreciate your comments, very, just thoughtful in terms of we need to not be thinking about just this one event, but what is our long-term plan? So clearly, I think another capital reserve, and I think we may want to consider, for Board of Education members are here, I think we may want to consider voting on that this year.
I agree.
To echo Brendan's comment and Walter's comment of, okay, if it's off the list now, what's the plan to do it? The plan may be, we've got 2029, the bond comes off for the high school. So funding is freed up there in 2029. We know we can't do all of it now. Let's vote on this bond. Let's vote on another capital reserve, and we know that now in another 4, 5, 6 years, whatever the case may be, that we have
Okay.
other
Harvey, I
monies.
think you have an
Let
opinion on that.
Let me just mention something there. I'm in full agreement. I say we set up as many savings accounts as we can. But the reality is, we have to be careful that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot. When we go into when the taxpayers go into the voting booth in May, think about what they're going to see. They're going to see the regular budget vote. They're going to see a proposition, maybe two, for this capital project, to borrow, say, $15 million, as well as, if it's the second piece for the athletic field. They're also going to see the Board of Elections. They're going to see a lot. To put up, let's just say it's a $5 or $10 million capital reserve, we have to be realistic and realize that some people just, no matter how much you might try to explain it, they don't fully get it. They may not understand it fully. So they're going to potentially think, oh my God, and they're going to spend another $5 or $10 million here. So we have to be careful that we don't overwhelm them with that. But I would, if there is a way that we can do it, I would be all for that.
There's a discussion to be had there.
Yes, yes. Yep.
Now, if we were to delay that, is that me?
Was his feet? Your hair looks great, Larry.
Yeah. I used to have, yeah. If we were to, let's say, delay that vote 1 year, would we have enough time to build the reserve for going back to when the high school comes off? Would the reserve, a 5, I would guess at least a 5, if not a 10.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So it might be if we delay it 1 year, we'd still have enough time to have it fully funded for when the high school
Right.
rolls off.
That's part of that discussion.
Yeah.
I think the key there too is no pressure, but there needs to be a budget that comes in that is, like you said before.
No pressure.
It needs to be lower than on par or below last year.
We are fully aware of that.
Just no pressure.
No pressure.
No, I think we discussed that at the communication committee meeting. I know we've discussed that on the side. There is an awareness that the yes votes on both propositions are probably the same people.
I didn't
Right.
do it.
And we're attacking this as kind of one exercise, so,
Right.
but yes.
Are there any other questions, comments? All right. I think one of the things two of the things I've gotten out of this meeting is that there needs to be a milestone schedule set up, and that's going to be worked on over the next 2 weeks. We need cost estimates for the line items, And do you think if we were to have another meeting in 2 weeks, would that give you enough time?
So, so I'm going through the list. What I'm going to be doing now is going back to the team, whether it's Tetra Tech or Walter or Harvey. So, and it's going to be just really qualification type questions. For example, when you talk about sports fields and a track, I'm going to ask, are we talking about a 6-lane track? Are we talking about an 8-lane track? What are we talking about? Are we talking about 4 sports on a synthetic field? What kind of room do we have when we're talking about parking and circulation? What's the coverage? Same thing with roofing. Walter talked about the infrared scan. I think that is important. But if we're doing a full rip-off down to the deck, as opposed to just maybe replacements in certain areas, that's important to know. On the HVAC side, are we talking about heating or heating and cooling? Are we tying back to a chiller? Are they packaged units? So all of these, what I'm going to do is for every line, I'm just going to come back with a bunch of questions to qualify so that, when the community asks, how did you come up with that number? We can say,
perfect.
We talked about full depth as opposed to a mill and fill on that kind of thing is really important. In the areas that we're doing site work, are we doing any sidewalk work? Are we doing curbs? How much stormwater are we doing? All of those things, I'm going to really try to, as much detail as I can get so I can say, this is the justification for the number. So 2 weeks, can I come back with some starting points? Yes. I don't know that we'll be there because I don't know
What
that.
holds you to the penny? What?
No, I think that there's just a lot there,
As long as we can have something in 2 weeks that we can begin to have a more meaningful discussion.
And maybe I push with, and I qualified. If I don't have an answer, I say, okay, new bleachers, setting it up for 800 people capacity. When we're talking about a press box, if you're talking about a press box, I'm going to put a number to it and say, hey, this is what you're getting with the press box. Lighting, sports field lighting, are we reusing existing and moving it? Or is there new lighting? So I'm going to maybe force that, right? I'll force that line or that question, and then we take it off if you guys decide to take it off. But
Now, Nancy had asked about the possibility of going out 3 weeks instead of 2, but knowing that we're going to have a relatively short timeline, I'd rather not do that.
I'll work hard at putting together.
Okay.
some
And
numbers.
again, understood that you may not have every one of these things down to
And
the.
what we can do is start the conversation, like you said, big picture, and then we'll continue to fine tune. But that's what I'm going to do on all
He's got your
these.
speed dial so you two can talk all the time.
Asbestos is another one, right? We're going into all these old bathrooms. What's behind the wall? What am I putting there for a hazmat
Okay.
contingency? So
Okay.
each one of those lines, that's what I'm going to be poking back at these guys and asking those questions.
Larry,
Yes.
just to jump in on your closure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just as a point of clarity, so there's no ambiguity here. Are we working directly with Lou? Are we working, who's like who's the point contact of all this? I know you guys are together, but like, who's taking lead on what we're asking out of that bullet item? Okay? Okay. All the questions will be funneled through you, you'll distribute to Walter and/or answer yourself, or whatever is feasible? Yep. Okay.
No, that makes sense.
I'm just looking to understand it, that's all I am. Just to, I remember I asked you 3 weeks ago, how's that flow chart work, so we understand,
Yeah, and I think you're right.
who's the go-to?
I think that what we're going to do, when I ask the questions, it's definitely going to go through Walt and Harvey, and then they're going to push to Tetra Tech for any more detail that they don't have. But initially, I'm going to go to the guys that know your
course.
facilities, know your buildings, and they're going to get me a quicker answer, and then they may go back to Tetra Tech for what are we allowed to do? and go from there.
Realistically, we're going to be working together.
That's right, yeah. We talk all the time.
Good.
Not that I want to, but we do.
Are there any other questions? Okay, then how about yes. Oh, yeah, sure, Jean.
I guess, since I represent the staff, I'm wondering where we fit into, are we going to get the survey two or a survey? Or, how are we going to get the staff input for this?
Well, as of now, we just thought it was one survey for everyone, regardless of their background, so we have an apples-to-apples comparison. But that's just for this very initial round, just because we need to get something out quickly. But if we're talking about, what do we call it, boxes? I don't know. Phase one, stage one, box one. In the latter part of that, in the input, I think that, we can start talking about a staff-specific, whether that's a questionnaire or a forum. I think that is definitely valuable, but that's something to keep in mind as we create the actual milestones. But to answer the question about this very first survey, this is sort of like get our minimal viable product out there that can touch everybody, that we can now, just have a baseline and then build from there.
So it's probably worth mentioning, Gene, that this document, this
Right.
year, was honed in based on the building condition survey
Right.
and communication with all the administrators of each building. So it's not like.
There wasn't input, no.
Correct.
Absolutely no.
There-
Yeah.
There's 11 by 17 pages here, of pages that'll make you dizzy, of
Input, yeah.
of preliminary input, and then this was, again, stripped from this to a tangible document that, I believe Harvey and Terry worked on with Walter to make this a tangible product as opposed to this mountain. Well, they did the mountain work, they did the lion's share, and we're here to try and hone this, take this to that referendum level.
And to further clarify, on this shortened document, because I had a question at the last meeting, and I don't believe you were here, I could be wrong.
I was in the audience. I wasn't on the committee yet.
Okay, that's why I was questioning, were you out there?
I was.
Yeah, but this doesn't mean that this is the final list, right?
Right.
As Harvey said, we can go back and pull something off of the building conditions survey
Right.
or off of somewhere else. If it didn't make the cut on this list, it doesn't mean it's cut. Yeah.
Did I send you that document?
You did.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Anything else? How about October 12th, 2 weeks from today?
Time?
Is 6:30 okay? I mean, that way we get home in a decent hour. Yeah, all right, 6:30.
So, this room, Larry,
Yes?
will be, I'll put one of my other hats on. That will be the CES Drama Club. We'll be doing rehearsals from 5:30 to 7 on Tuesday night. So if you wanted to do October 13th on a Wednesday, as far as the Drama Club, it's open. That's if you want to do it here. If you want to do it in another building, check it out. But there will be a conflict that time, that day.
I say we try to stick to a single day, make it a uniform day.
Yeah, that's what I'm, trying to do, yeah. And I, you guys wouldn't want to, like, rehearse Wednesday night?
You can email all the parents. That will change. Starting with Terry, by the way.
Yeah.
We gladly pass that hat to you for that week.
We go to the middle school cafeteria, right? We can find
Okay, well, it'll be Tuesday night, 6:30, someplace.
Terry's off.
And by tomorrow or something, we'll find a spot. And when I send out the copy of the minutes, I'll let you all know where, okay?
So I have a conflict on that night. You guys circled me for that one. And is Tuesday is definitely the best day for you all. Or has a regular conflict on Tuesday nights that she's been missing. And if Tuesday has to be the day, that's totally fine, but I just want to at least have a conversation.
Hmm.
Wednesdays, I cannot.
You can't,
Wednesdays, I cannot.
you can't do
I
Wednesdays.
cannot.
cannot do Wednesdays.
Not that I'm not the linchpin here, but.
Yeah, but no. I mean, just that we happen to get everybody on a Tuesday, you know, that's, could do that, except
Everybody meets on Monday.
yeah,
Remember that.
they say, yeah,
Everybody meets on Monday.
everybody else meets on Monday also. Thursday?
Still can't do it here, though.
Are you on the team or are you off the team? What team
Man,
are
I'm
you
on all the teams.
Just move to the cafeteria, Jesus.
I mean, we could try to do it at the same time and just see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I agree, Brendan.
Yeah, it'll be more entertaining.
If you look at, I know what you're saying, David, but if you look at Mondays, usually, well, I know the town meetings on Mondays are always the same days as our meetings, and I think they're the same days as your meetings.
Yeah, but there's a work session and a business meeting, both on Monday nights.
Yeah, but the town does the
So
same
there's
thing. I'm just saying,
Two
are
Monday
they?
nights a month, 2 out of 4.
Okay, I mean, it's just something to think about, that if it wasn't when everybody else was meeting, we could,
2 weeks Monday is Columbus Day, so that we would then have to go out 3 weeks, and I really don't want to push it off that far. If, Barb, can you phone in?
I can do Thursday.
Or, okay, so we'll do it the 12th at 6:30, location to be determined. Okay? And your rehearsals, how long does this going to be involved so that we don't have to wonder?
About 3 days until the end of my life. No, January 15th is the
So we
performance
ought
with
to
the rain date on the 16th.
eliminate this room on Tuesdays forever.
Tuesdays and Thursdays, yeah.
Okay, so wherever
5:30
we
to
end up
7.
going, let's see if we can make sure that we can have it moving forward.
Yeah.
Okay. I still think you guys should meet Mondays and Wednesdays. you know.
Thanks, Larry.
Or-
Take that into account.
Okay, if there's nothing else? All right, well, thank you. It was a good meeting.